The Hay Band Network.
Welcome to the Hay Band Network. Today we have Dan Morrison from Ronald Reagan High School and Happy Not Satisfied. Welcome to the Hay Band Network, Mr. Morrison.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Awesome. And so you've just launched Happy Not Satisfied this summer, and then you just released something very recently, a resource. And so we wanted to bring you on and talk to you about that. Also, your experiences, you've been a band director for 11 years at Ronald Reagan High School in San Antonio, one of the great band programs in the United States, and you lead that organization. Just lots of accolades and great stuff you all have done, and Macy's and Rose Bowl Parade and BOA, and I mean, you name it, and you've taken your kids. So towards the back end, we'll talk a little bit about band and Ronald Reagan High School and some stuff you've done there. But again, we want to talk about Happy Not Satisfied. You want to add anything about yourself first before we jump into Happy Not Satisfied?
No, you did a great job of covering all the things. I think one thing not everyone knows about me is that I'm actually from Illinois, and I moved from Texas and went to the University of Illinois. So that would just be maybe the only other thing that I would add. But thank you for the kind introduction. That was really generous of you. Happy Not Satisfied. Is something I'm super passionate about. And the first time I actually ever heard the phrase was from my dad, who was my band director in high school. He was the band director at Prospect High School in Illinois for 30 years, had an amazing career. He won Teacher of the Year for the state of Illinois. He was the only music teacher to ever do that. Just my role model and a huge inspiration. And when I was in high school, I'd hear him say that, and I didn't exactly, I don't think, know why those words really stuck with me, but it would always be like if we had a great performance, he would say, "This is great, but let's be happy, but not satisfied." And it always resonated with me, and it stuck with me. And so when I started teaching, and especially when I became the head director at Reagan, I knew how much that phrase meant to me. So I just started kind of implementing it into what we did there. And eventually it really became a serious part of what we did there. And the students really bought into it. And it was something we talked about literally almost every rehearsal, after every performance. And it kind of was woven into the fiber of the band program. And it was just a really meaningful thing for the students. And then, I started to realize, maybe I can kind of apply this to my personal life because, I was a pretty anxious and, stressed out person being the head director at Reagan. And I took over when I was 27. It was very overwhelming. And just in general, even before then, I would say I was kind of, a glass half empty kind of person, a little bit of a pessimist, just on the negative side, always like thinking, well, I'll be happy once I do this, and then I'll allow myself to feel joy, all these things that we can talk more about. But I finally realized, like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be something I can do different. And so I was so great about doing it with my students, but terrible about doing it with myself. And so I just applied it to my personal life and started developing routines and waking up earlier and trying to eat better and reading more and drinking more water, all these things. I just focused on myself, and it made an unbelievable difference, not only in how I felt and how I was operating, but in my ability to do my job, in my relationship with my wife, my relationships with friends. It was pretty unbelievable. So in the last few months, I started to think, well, I wonder if other people kind of need to hear this message too, because I certainly did. Especially in our profession specifically, it's very easy to think that we need to put ourselves last in order to put our students first. And so we don't take care of ourselves, and we think somehow in doing that, it's giving our students a better experience because we're giving everything of ourselves to them. But what I've discovered is if we're not putting ourselves first too, that we're actually doing them a disservice because we're not giving the best of ourselves to them. And then I zoomed out a little bit more and realized this really applies to everybody, no matter what profession you're in. You can't do what you need to do at the highest level unless you're taking care of yourself. You can't take care of your own personal children the same way. You can't take care of your relationship the same way. You can't do your job at as high of a level if you're not thinking clearly, if you're not following routines that set the foundation for you to be able to execute at a high level. So that's kind of where all of this started and how it turned into what it is now, where I've sort of kind of launched this whole thing with it. And yeah, as you mentioned, I put together this guidebook that I intended to be a one-stop shop for how to get started in wellness, essentially. And I tried to make it so, like, if I was trying to figure some things out and feel better, what's a resource I could use where if I didn't want to, I literally wouldn't have to go anywhere else, at least at first. And then, obviously do your own research and go beyond that in ways that you want to. But, it talks about mindset and how to stay motivated and different ways of looking at goal setting and setting routines. But then it also gives very specific information about getting started with eating better, how to work out. And there's a million ways to work out. And I don't cover all of them. I give some concrete examples so that people can get started. And that was my goal with it. And even if you're further along in some of that stuff, I think the goal setting and the routines and the mindset and how to approach what you're doing. And I talk about in there this idea of our level 1 of human nature, where it's, for some reason, our minds try to convince us to do the things that are the opposite of what are actually going to make us feel better. And I've always found that so, like, perplexing. Like, why is that? Why is our initial reaction to be to, like, sit on the couch and eat something unhealthy, even though we know that's going to make our future selves feel worse, when if we were maybe active and ate a little bit better, and those things would make us feel better the next day and the next week and the next month. So just talking about some of those ideas, and I know I have so many things I could say about all this, and I'm kind of going down rabbit holes here, but that's sort of where Happy Not Satisfied started and how it got to this point. So hopefully it kind of answered your question.
And so for anybody listening, where do they find that? Where can they find this information?
Satisfied.com. Hopefully super easy to remember. That's where you can find the guidebook. And then I also have a lot of other resources up there and articles that I write and put up there about all of these things with mindset and the transformation I've been through and the journey I've been through, and with talking to other people. And I've done a lot of, speaking. Like I had the great pleasure of speaking to your students, and I'm started doing more of that. Like I talked to University of Incarnate Word, and I'm talking to Texas State and the North Texas Marching Band and Baylor. So more of that stuff is happening, and you can contact me through my website if you have any interest in bringing me in to do some of that.
And first, I would tell anyone, bring Mr. Morrison in and talk to your students or your classes. It's great, and the kids absolutely love it and get a lot out of it too. So, like, you're a band director and you're running this really cool program. Obviously, band directing is a little bit different right now, but you're Happy Not Satisfied. How do you, and maybe that's part of the Happy Not Satisfied, juggling this or balancing this, all this stuff. So how do you keep yourself balanced in running this and taking care of it and also doing the band director stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's not always easy, of course, because being a band director, especially in certain times of the year, is unbelievably time consuming. But, I have lived through marching band seasons where I, especially recently, made all of this a priority. And I think that's the big word, is priorities. And if you decide to make yourself a priority, you will find the time to do that. I was living through football and competitions and the rehearsals and all of that, but was still able to, wake up a little earlier, get to the gym, and do the things I needed to do to make sure I was going to feel good so that I could help my students at the highest level. So in terms of just purely being a band director and finding times for wellness, I know firsthand that it's possible because I've lived it. But then having, extra hobbies on the side and different things you do. And I know, again, you're someone that can relate to this because you always are finding more things to keep yourself busy. So it's definitely possible, and it's a matter of prioritizing things the right way, planning ahead. And it's interesting because the better you start to feel from some of the things I'm talking about, the more you start to somehow feel like you have more time. And I don't know, it's interesting because you don't actually have more time. I think you just realize that you can maximize your time in a different way because you almost kind of rewire your brain. You start to think a lot more clearly, and you're more efficient because of how you're treating yourself. And so that's what I found. It was like, I could barely survive just doing my job. It was so much. But then as I became, more well, for lack of a better way of saying that, I started feeling I had more time and that I could do my job at the absolute highest level and also find other interests and also develop things in other places, which then now you have an outlet outside of your job, which makes your job feel more fresh when you're there. And this whole sort of symbiosis that comes out of all of this. It's not just like one thing makes this happen. It's this growth that is generated through all of these different avenues.
And it's so true, like how you feel like you have more time and you can get more stuff done. I mean, I've seen it on my end, but just watching you through your Instagram and anybody that wakes up and sees your Instagram, you're usually up before a lot of people. But it's fun, and I think it's motivating too to say, hey, you know, there's other people that are really successful at their job in the band director world, and yet make the time. You share it with everybody else that you're making the time. I think that's the big difference. That one of the reasons I was like, man, we got to get you on here when the time is right, because to show others it is possible, and you can run a fantastic band program and still take care of yourself and have these other projects on top of it. And so it's always great if like to check out his Instagram and see what time Dan wakes up is always fun, and his adventures in the morning are always great for you.
Daniel D. Morrison on Instagram, for anyone that's wondering.
So let's talk about the band director side on the Hey Band Network and how a band director can implement this. So obviously this is a self-care type program, but how can a band director that's watching this like, okay, I'm in the middle of this new band and new teaching cycle. How do I implement something like this? How do I apply this to my program or some of these concepts in general? And then maybe even so we can dive into a little bit how we do it while we're virtual or we're not seeing all of our kids.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think I would answer that sort of in two parts, because I think it's great to implement it with your students and how you approach your program with everybody in your program, but then also how to do it personally. Because like I said, it was with my students for a long time before I even had the idea to try it with myself. But I think when you have both of those going at a high level, that's when you're really onto something. And that's what I kind of discovered. But in terms of with your students, I don't think it needs to be any like major ordeal that you make this like big fuss over. It's just something that you gradually start to talk about and explain. And I think really one of the best places you can start to talk about it is when we're back in person and maybe things are a little bit more normal. When you have a performance or if something goes well and people are feeling good, those are great times to start to introduce this idea that, all right, guys, we're happy, but we're not satisfied. And both of those are equally important in this whole equation, because yes, you should absolutely be happy. You should be happy that you improved today in rehearsal. You should be happy that that rep was better than the rep before. But in order to keep that happiness and not fall into this sort of complacency, we can't be satisfied. And that's a good thing. You know, sometimes people will be like, what do you mean not satisfied? You know, that sounds negative. I'm never going to be satisfied. But it's, you know, it's about how you look at it, right? It's not meant to be a negative thing. It's just this idea that we are joyful and happy about the growth we've made, and we're looking forward to the growth that we're going to continue to make. Because I mean, I'm a firm believer in the idea that you're not going to stay still. You know, if you feel like you're staying still, you're probably actually getting worse. You've got to always be striving to find new ways and to find improved growth and realizing that there's joy within that, not looking at it as, okay, well, we've got to get to this next goal and then we can kind of let ourselves be happy. And I think that's really important to talk about with students, is this idea of I'll be happy once I. So for them, you know, it's like, I'll be happy once I finish my homework, you know, something that simple. Or I'll be happy once the band makes finals, or I'll be happy once I find a boyfriend or girlfriend. So, and it can be anything, but we all fall into sort of that trap, I think. And that's where I feel like the antidote to that idea of I'll be happy once I is happy not satisfied, because it turns it completely on its head. And you look at it as achievements being byproducts of the process, and that you find joy in the process. And then along the way, it's like, wow, look at these great things are happening because we paid attention to what we were doing every day. And that was eye-opening for me, because when I was finally able to look at it, we definitely enjoyed and were fortunate to have some success with the band, but it skyrocketed when I started to look at it differently and approach it from that idea of being happy, not satisfied, and looking at achievements as byproducts of the process. So in terms of your band program and how you talk to students and how you approach things, that would be my advice, is talking about some of those things. And I think that it's something you have to be consistent with, because you can't just say it once or twice and think like, you know, you've preached the gospel gospel that everyone's just going to understand and all of a sudden internalize. It takes a while, it could take months or years, for it to really fully be implemented. But then once everyone knows what it is, and you don't have to explain a million things every time you talk about it, it's just like a quick switch that can flip and help out, like whether it's in the middle of rehearsal where there's like a lull, you need to bring it up, or at the end of a long night or a football game or whatever. It's that thing that you can say that everyone understands, and it's kind of like a reset. So that's what I would say in terms of the students and in the band program. Then within ourselves and as individuals, how we can kind of think about this stuff, I would say don't try to just jump in and do all the things at once, right? Like I've been developing things that I do for a long time, and I didn't just say, I'm going to do every single thing right now, because that becomes really daunting and probably unsustainable if you try it that way. So literally for me, it was like, I want to try waking up a little earlier. Like that was step one. And so I did. And it wasn't, 4 a.m. like it is now. It was maybe 5:30, something like that, even 6. Like I was always how late can I possibly wake up and still almost make it in on time, and just like I like falling asleep at my desk kind of thing. I mean, literally, I was a completely different person. So I started doing that, and it felt good. I felt accomplished, and I pushed through, and I did even when I didn't want to do it. And so then that was something I enjoyed, and I was proud of myself for. So then it was like, okay, well, what else can I do? Maybe I'll start eating a little bit better, and then you kind of hold on to that for a while. And so I would say that if you implement things in a progression, it's a lot more likely to stick. And once it's cemented into your routine, it doesn't necessarily feel like a burden or something that you have to overly think about to make it happen. It's just part of your day. It's just, it's what you do. And like I said, it's a matter of priorities. And like you said, it's a matter of making the time and not saying I don't have time. I don't have time just means it's not a priority, in my opinion, and that's not to say that people aren't super busy. And I know they are, and we are, but we don't, like, if we don't have our own health and well-being and wellness, then not much else ultimately matters, and we can't do much else if it really gets to an extreme point. So that's why I think it has to be a priority for everybody, because otherwise you're going to look up and realize I'm really, not feeling good, or I'm having this health issue, or I can't do this or that because I didn't take care of myself. And then maybe you are motivated to change something, but I would recommend trying to do something different before it gets to that point, if possible. So that's kind of I guess, overview of those two different ways of implementing this whole happy, not satisfied idea.
And it's like you said, they are both related. Take care of yourself helps your program. But I also know some people are on here just to like, okay, so here's a successful band director and he's doing something right. And how do I implement what he's doing? Because I think that's what everybody's looking for, other ways to improve and grow the program. And that's why I think having you come visit a band program, however, is great for everybody. And to hear that message from you too is great. So, so let's turn this on how this relates to Ronald Reagan High School, because your last couple of years have been, and the band program has just done some amazing things and had a lot of success. And then hearing how you talk about happy, not satisfied, guessing that has something to do with it. You took over a highly successful program that was already, I've seen the program for years since the school opened. That band has been rolling since day one, it seems like. And so you took over an already highly successful program. So what are some things when in your time, maybe it is just this, but some things that have helped you to take something that's already at a really good level and to grow that and move that along on that chart of success and opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like you said, it's an amazing program, and it has been forever. And it's funny too, because we're kind of putting together this production for our students right now where we're calling it Iconic, and it's moments from Reagan Band history, like the early 2000s and stuff like that. So it's been cool to go back to all that and how it's still relevant now, even though it was 18 years ago, but I think some of the biggest thing for me, and whenever I get asked questions like this, I usually give some type of answer that I'm going to give right now, but it's all related to the culture and the culture that's developed within the band program and the positivity and finding ways for students to love what they're doing, not for it to feel like the directors are forcing students to do things. And I think if we can find ways to do that, that is more than half the battle. And of course, the teaching and the pedagogy and the information, all that stuff is hugely important and needs to be there. But you're not going to get that next level or the next layer or whatever you want to call it without having a culture of excellence and a culture of positivity within your program. And so it's easy to say that, and I guess thing to actually implement it on a day-to-day basis. But I think it all starts with the approach of the people that are in front of the students every day, and everybody really being on the same page and buying into the idea of this positive culture and the way that directors talk to students and the way that directors present themselves and talk about competition. I mean, I think that's a huge one that, you know, people say, and it's true, competition can bring the best out of people and it can bring the worst out of people. The way that students think about competition, ultimately, in my opinion, is coming from the person that's leading them and the way that that person is talking about it and framing it. And I spend a ton of time, especially during marching band, de-emphasizing the importance of competitive results because I don't think a student, or it's in human nature, if you're going to a competition, you want to do well at it. You know, we don't need to like continue to harp on that idea. Students are going to want to do well at competition no matter what. They're not going to lose the motivation to want to do well at a competition, in my experience. So it's our job to reframe what's important about what we do and how we ultimately don't have control over the competitive result. We have control over how we work every day. We have control over working to communicate with the audience and creating special moments for people. And that's ultimately what it's all about anyway, completely outside of the realm of competition. I truly, in my heart, believe that. It's not just something I say because it sounds like the thing that the guy is supposed to say, you know. It's genuinely how I feel, and I feel it more every year that I do this because I feel like my greatest pride moments are watching the shows and the feelings that I get from the students when they're performing, not necessarily standing at retreat and hearing awards. It's the communication and the amazing things that high school students are able to do. So if I'm talking about it in that way every day and all the time, then that's what students are going to start to believe. And I know that that's had a huge impact at Reagan and on the students there, because if you are ultimately, students are going to be let down at some point if the competitive result is how they're defining themselves, because you might have a couple great years, but you're not going to win every contest that you go to for the rest of the time, you know? And so that's a really slippery slope and kind of a dangerous game to play. And I've seen it happen where directors harp on the competitive side because they feel like they need to maybe to motivate their students in a certain way. And then it doesn't go the way they were hoping. And then there's resentment there. That's the opposite of a culture of positivity. So I bring that one kind of specific point up because I actually think it's one of the more important parts of what we have to do to be successful educators and band directors and leaders of programs. And it's our responsibility to do that because it also, I mean, that's going to help frame the way students look at competition in their lives in the future too, like beyond being in high school band program. So developing that culture of positivity, de-emphasizing that competitive result. And then, yeah, I mean, I know we've talked about it a lot already, but talking about this idea, it doesn't have to exactly be, you don't have to tell your students be happy, not satisfied if that's not exactly how it resonates with you, but having some kind of, even if it's not a catchphrase, but just something that has meaning to you and to the students that you can all relate to, that's a positive thing that pushes the program forward in a way that doesn't only lend itself to what happens with the competitive results. Those are all things that I am thinking about all the time and that I'm trying to make the priority at Reagan. So like I said, the teaching and the excellence and all of that has to be there, but the culture to me is in a league of its own in terms of importance with regards to a successful program.
Excellent. Yeah. Very, very good. So we're in a little different age of teaching. So what are some challenges? I mean, you know, you've had a lot of success, but we all have challenges teaching virtually or partial virtually and trying to bring students on campus. right now. So are there any hurdles, or maybe there's one you've kind of dealt with? I think you guys have been in school a little bit. Are there any hurdles you guys as a band staff or a band program have had to deal with this new teaching environment and that you've been able to overcome or kind of get past? Because we're all dealing with that. I'm guessing you have some of those challenges also.
Yeah, we certainly have challenges. I mean, I think I would say right now our biggest challenge is, and I know a lot of people can agree and relate, is the unknown. I mean, we have students coming back for some in-person rehearsal things in just a little over a week, and I still don't know exactly what the guidelines are for that. You know, it's like as banders, we're usually planning a year out or more sometimes, and to not be able to plan even a week out or sometimes even a few days out, that takes a lot of rewiring of the brain a little bit and letting go and knowing that there's nothing I could do right now to change the fact that I don't know what that's going to look like in a week and a half. So I have to just let go and be okay with that, and then be ready to move quickly and make sure that I'm communicating very clearly and transparently with parents, which I've tried to make a huge priority, and I think it's really paid off. Is they just need to understand too that you're doing your best with the information that you have, and you're going to give them the information you have once you have it. And I think sometimes we maybe forget that that's an important step, and then all of a sudden all these parents are thinking that we didn't plan or something, when that's not the case at all. So that would be one piece of advice that I would give if you're not doing it already. And then I guess to overcome that is just changing your mindset, because I would say have a bunch of different options, and you can, but I was just talking to our dance director the other day, and it's like, we could have plan A through Z and none of those are going to happen in 2 days. So I think having general ideas of what you want to do, but being ready to shift on a moment's notice and being okay with it and not letting it blow up your day or make you upset, that's the only way to survive right now. And so that my staff and I have all worked really hard on that. With the virtual learning, that's had a learning curve for us for sure. And we've met about it. We've done a lot of things and tried to develop some different ways of doing it. Now I'm actually, I'm pleased with what we're able to do. It doesn't compare to being in person, obviously, but we're trying to make it so maybe what we do virtually is different than what we would do in person on purpose, so that it's not like we're just trying to do in-person band but online, because I don't think that would necessarily totally work. So one thing that we did, we had a virtual band camp, and we did a really cool thing. We were able to have this all-star masterclass day where I was talking to Greg and Mason, my colleagues, and it was just like, what if we just reach out to like super successful people and see if they want to spend an hour with each of the band, because they might, they're not playing really right now, and all they have to do is turn their computer on. And we were right. I mean, so like we had a day, it was a Friday, first week of our camp, and we had people from the Chicago Symphony and the Boston Symphony, the New York Philharmonic and the Marine Band, all these amazing organizations that came on, and whatever instrument they played, they spent an hour with that section, and it was incredible. And I would never have thought to do something like that if it wasn't for the circumstance that we were in right now. It's like necessity is the mother of invention, and that is the definition of our lives at the moment, right? So the way I look at it is, let's discover things that maybe we wouldn't have thought of before that we can use in the future. We'll do in person, obviously, and all that, but I can almost guarantee that people are finding things that are great that they can use after this year that they never would have thought of if this circumstance didn't present itself. So those are some of the things that we've done, and I guess the way we're trying to approach the uncertainty.
And it's just good to hear how someone else does it too. We are all trying to figure out, it's not like marching band. And so it's, what are you using? What are you using? How are you making this work? And just that borrow from everyone type approach right now seems to be a pretty good motto too, to just find a better way to make it happen for your kids and in the best circumstance. So, and the all-star thing, I remember when you posted that was great to see. And what a great experience for your kids to have all those people come in and work with them and play for them and work through stuff. That's awesome. So, all right. One more, Any projects you have going on for the Reagan Band?
The big one, and it was actually not that long ago that we decided to kind of do this, because we have been waiting and trying to see what's going to happen and what a football game's going to look like. Should we be doing a show? What should that look like? Is it a pep band? You know, but ultimately I decided that having a production that everyone can kind of be working on is really important, and it makes students feel purpose and gets them excited, and has that extra level of buy-in, I think, that we didn't want to lose. And so if things take a turn or whatever with the virus and we can't really do much, then we're going to find a way to have people record themselves and put together some kind of a digital project through this. Or it could be a show with everybody, or it could be a show with some people that sub out, but it's going to be flexible. But we felt, like I said, like it was important to have something, a common goal, the band program, so that the color guard can choreograph to this music and the dance team can choreograph to it, and the winds and percussion have music written specifically for this year, this production that they're working on. And I was very clear up front, very clear, is like, there's a good chance this is not going to be the normal marching band show. I was like, I need you guys to understand this. I'm going to present something to you, and I think you're going to be excited about it. But please know that this could look in very different and in a lot of different versions in the end. And so whether they fully took that in or not, I tried to be super clear about it. But so what we did was, we looked back and all those 2002 and 2003 and 2004 and 5, and then some of the more recent shows, and like mostly shows Aaron Guidry, who writes our music now and wrote the music back in the early 2000s, mostly stuff he had done that he worked to weave together in a really cool way. So it's like the pre-show from 2003 leads into the Impact from 2002, and then like the Napoleon Dynamite quote that people know from 2005 comes, like, so it's cool, it's nostalgic, and it's got some great moments in it, and it wasn't like we didn't have to reinvent the wheel and produce this whole massive new production in order to get it done, but still make it something meaningful and cool for students. And it's given us the opportunity to teach them about the history of the program, and why we're able to do what we do is because of what they did back then, and we owe a debt of gratitude to that, So that's that project, and that's been cool, and it's been fun, and students are excited about it, and they got their smart music assignments on the show, and it's like, just to say I have a smart music assignment on the show for some of them, I think is exciting, So we've been doing that, and then with the wind ensemble, the top band and the symphonic band, we have a concert band piece that our ultimate goal is to put it together quickly as we can once we're in person, because everybody has learned their part at a super high level individually. So, that's not earth shattering. I'm sure other people are doing something like that too, but like, we're taking Festive Overture because it's a great piece. It's fun. It's kind of all at one tempo. It's got technique. It's got stuff to work on. It's in smart music, which is great. And we've got methodical assignments that everyone's doing and passing off. And then when we come together, it's like, all right, let's make this happen quickly because we're approaching this different way. So those are a couple of things that we're doing. We're having, maybe not obviously, but we're doing a lot of region performances. So every Friday we have students volunteer or be voluntold that they're going to play a cut of their region music for the class, so they can unmute themselves and play for everybody on Zoom. And it's really interesting because kids get really nervous doing that. You might think that because they're behind the computer, they feel a little more calm, but it really puts them on the spot, which is, I think, a good thing. And I think they realize it's a good thing too, because it's forcing them to play in front of people, even though we're all kind of isolated, which is kind of cool. So that's, I guess, the Reader's Digest version of what's going on in virtual learning right now with the Reagan Band.
That's great. And just part of just sharing with everybody what you're doing, I think is valuable for anyone listening, and saying, hey, we can find a way to adapt that, incorporate that down the road, or sometime soon, maybe even. So very cool. Awesome. I mean, it's been great to have you on here and to listen, talk about Happy Not Satisfied, and what a great, I don't think it's a project because it seems like more like that, but what you're providing and then now you're sharing with everybody is awesome. Any other shout outs you have for the Hey Band Network?
Just, if you want to check out happynotsatisfied.com, like I said, there's a lot of great stuff on there, and the guidebook is on there. Happy Not Satisfied on Facebook. There's a Facebook group, and then I am at Daniel D. Morrison on Instagram. And then beyond that, I mean, that's kind of the Happy Not Satisfied shout outs. That you can follow Reagan Band on Instagram. It's just at Reagan Band. There's also Ronald Reagan High School Marching Band, I think is the name of it on Facebook. So we're trying to get ourselves out there in front of the world. So check it all out.
Awesome. Dan Morrison, thank you for joining us on the Hey Band Network today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a blast.
Awesome. So anybody else watching, check out our Hey Band Network YouTube channel and Facebook for other videos. Thank you very much.